Hello and welcome back to an episode of Generation Oshi. My name is American Ben, and today we are going to break down the underlying meaning in the new Netflix anime, The Way of the Househusband. I'm not gonna lie to you, this is another anime that I watched because Netflix told me to. It was haunting me, right there on my feed every time I logged into my account. However, if it happened to me, as in if I got roped into it, I figure there has to be some people out there in our audience who would happen to as well. Now this show will be one of the easiest to offer a synopsis on, given that it's simpler and more straightforward than, say, Alice in Borderland or High-Rise Invasion. There's no otherworldly realms where people are dead but not dead and everything's a metaphor but actually it's all real. The Way of the Househusband follows the daily doings of Tatsu, a former Yakuza and a legendary one known as the Immortal Dragon at that. Being that Tatsu is retired, we don't follow his life in the criminal underworld. Rather, we take in the lighthearted events that transpire in his retirement. Basically, he's been thrust into the role of house husband in order to keep domestic affairs in order, while his wife Miku spends her days awash in the white-collar working world. I did no research going into the show, and I know nothing of the manga it's based on. I didn't know whether its narrative would be complex and highly metaphorical or easy to digest. And yeah, as I alluded to before, it was fairly straightforward. I ultimately enjoyed the show as a nice, relaxing change-up from all of the doom and despair in the other content we cover. That said, while I savor the relaxing comical fare, the show makes its mark in juxtaposing contrary elements, a la pineapple on pizza, but in this case, a hardened Yakuza gangster against the happy simplicity of home life. When we're first introduced to Tatsu, it seems like all is good with him, and he's fully turned over a new leaf.
I'm just protecting my turf in my own special way. You can't protect what's sacred to you through violence.
As implied in his words to Masa, an underling in his former gang, Tatsu displays a newfound wisdom and peace in his post-Yakuza life. And yet much of his new life is a reflection of his old one, including the fact that his old Yakuza buddies, like Masa, hang around in his life.
Being a house husband ain't no joke.
House husband? You liar! You're not a house husband! Who put you up to this, huh?
Old demons will pull you back into your old life, and as we see for Tatsu, it's hard for him to redefine himself after living a certain type of way for so long. And it's not just him who struggles to acclimate to the new world, and by new world I don't just mean the larger world away from the underworld, but a world in which the ways of the Yakuza are dying out altogether. Tatsu constantly runs into other retired Yakuza members who are trying to figure out how to survive on the straight and narrow and participate in the market in a legal way, and often things don't go so smoothly. We often see Tatsu act paranoid. He sees enemies everywhere. The show tries to convey a sense of trauma in Tatsu in a comical but truly tragic way. Adapted to the gangster life, he forever will have a hard time finding peace. And the people in the world around him don't offer him much help in this regard.
My God, that's a Yakuza harassing an honest citizen. So scary. Oh no.
Ordinary civilians make assumptions about Tatsu based on his appearance and act fearful of him before getting to know him. Now, fair enough, the Yakuza reap such reactions because they do things that hurt people, and thus the public isn't eager to help them acclimate to their world. The Way of the Househusband makes a purposeful effort to humanize all of the Yakuza in the show. Not a single one of them really comes off as some sort of unhinged psychopath. They all have fears and worries and aren't all that tough or brooding. Beyond the public's obstinance to aid in Tatsu's reformation, the government takes the further step of actually hindering his efforts to adjust to his new life. The cops spy on and stalk him and view all of his actions in a negative light.
That tip-off we got was right. He's growing some suspicious-looking plants.
I'm not surprised. I knew that punk was gonna be up to no good.
No matter what he does, even if he's just growing basil plants, they assume he's breaking the law and harass him despite his efforts to behave. Society at large simply doesn't make it easy for a former gangster like Tatsu to reform himself. No one aside from his wife and friends has much patience with him, which must get frustrating. At times I think he may begin to think it'd be easier to simply resort to his gangster instincts.
I was called the Immortal Dragon and survived in the underworld for all those years. And now I gotta be charming. Huh. That's it!
Now this all said, really, Tatsu's biggest obstacle in adjusting to his new life is his own mind. Despite being retired from criminal life, he still displays the fanatical discipline and piety required of a Yakuza and abides by the Yakuza code despite no longer being bound to it.
And this really doesn't matter at all, but I've already got this one. Got this one. Got this one.
I must pay!
Numerous times throughout the show, Tatsu is quick to suggest he be physically reprimanded for minor indiscretions, whether in response to buying his wife a manga doll she already has or accidentally walking into the women's locker room at the gym.
Tatsu, are you okay?
Boss lady.
Boss lady.
I will face the consequences! Tie me up if you must and bury me in the mountain or dump me in the sea wearing cement shoes!
Again, this comes off as comical, but it's really kind of sad. I get the sense that he acts this way not only because he's conditioned to, but because this is the only way he knows how to function. He definitely doesn't understand normal social interaction.
Do you like to sing?
Bragging's not my style. But I ain't never sung once in my life.
Really?
And he doesn't believe in his ability to manage himself. He's a warrior without a master. He comes from a long life lived within a rigid hierarchical structure, and now in his new life he has no boss to tell him what to do. As a matter of fact, his wife puts little pressure on him to acclimate to his new surroundings. But in reality, he'd probably be much more comfortable with a boss laying out his day for him. And thus Tatsu is able to shield himself from confronting his vulnerabilities by maintaining his Yakuza mentality.
Ugh. This place has roaches now?
I don't know where this hitman came from or who sent him. But he's got some balls thinking he can just waltz into the immortal dragon's turf.
Here he treats an invading cockroach like a hitman, and though we laugh, we also kind of have to wonder whether or not Tatsu is fully sane. Well, I definitely think he has some mental health issues given his difficult past and obvious indulgence in semi-delusion. But overall, approaching household chores with the same vim and vigor he did gangster life allows him to actually stay sane and retain some semblance of normalcy.
You still gotta prove yourself to me. Think you can handle it? Do ya?
Listen, when no one's watching, okay, sometimes when people are watching, I talk to inanimate objects too, but Tatsu fully anthropomorphizes them. Tatsu has this great energy that needs to be exerted, almost an angst that he's able to sate by launching into gangster-tinged melodramatic soliloquies directed at household items. He talks to them as if they're lackeys and runs his house like a Yakuza crime den. I think one may even be inclined to observe Tatsu's neurotic tendencies and extrapolate here beyond the easy offerings of the plot to see in him not just a gangster struggling to adjust to home life, but a man struggling to adjust to an atypical gender role in a rapidly progressing world. The Yakuza is kind of symbolic for an antiquated or traditional cultural element, and so here is this former Yakuza member playing house husband to the modern working woman. But that's not really what I infer from this story. To me, it's more about how, while we may assume that the show's elements would be disinclined to mesh, they actually do quite smoothly. By the end of the show, it actually is quite clear that Tatsu actually makes for a good house husband. He may struggle to acclimate to some aspects of society outside of the criminal underworld, but ultimately he's rather suited for home life, and this doesn't actually betray our stated thematic agenda of contrasting elements. Tatsu's unscrupulous appearance belies his kindly nature. He's rather motherly in a way that we oft conceive of mothers, albeit maybe wrongly at times. He's rather soft with a child who's left in his care by a neighbor. He even offers the kid tidbits of well-intentioned advice.
Everybody makes mistakes. It's like my old boss always said. If you make a mistake, put it 6 feet under. You see?
I see.
Okay, maybe sometimes gangster values don't amount to good parenting advice, but hey, all parents give bad advice sometimes. But I digress. Perhaps there is some gender commentary in this show then, in that one may assume that manly gangsters wouldn't make for tender caregivers, and yet Tatsu seems to have the potential to be rather tender-hearted. But even more centrally, we may be quick to assume that gangsters and housewives have nothing in common, so thus a gangster in the role of house husband would be like pineapple on pizza, out of place and overwhelmed. But yet the show suggests that gangsters and house husbands actually have a lot in common. Maybe not in terms of the whole murder thing, but in terms of the organization and discipline required to keep one's home in order and running smoothly. Both are perhaps best operated under a rigid structure.
The way of the house husband and the way of the Yakuza are connected. Boss, please teach me your ways!
What ways? DIY?
Additionally, Yakuza members must rely on themselves to take care of problems. Given the illicit nature of their work, they can't turn to the government or other experts for help. They need to be able to just figure things out. Similar challenges present themselves to house husbands and housewives who oft find themselves the only adult at home and thus can't rely on others to steer them in the right direction. That said, now YouTube's here to help. But perhaps what links Yakuza life and house husbandry more than anything is that both roles are oft looked down upon as lesser work by those in the working world. Both roles are seen as the easy way out. Yet I suppose we could posit that both require more struggle, labor, and careful planning than many would assume. And thanks to the lessons he learned in gangster life and the organizational skills and discipline he took from it, Tatsu makes for a really good house husband. And in his own special way takes a lot of pressure off of his busy working wife. And so that's my breakdown of The Way of the House Husband. Nice and simple, short and sweet. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do give it a big thumbs up. Let me know down in the comments below if you saw the show, what you thought of it. Subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss a damn thing. I'll catch you next time. Generation Ochi, peace.